Welcome to the A to Z of the Sega Dreamcast, and welcome to a new series where I will go through the library of a console and pick out one game from each letter that should be essential to your collection or on your backlog. Depending on a console, that library could span multiple editions or perhaps just one. We'll see how it goes. But here is the first edition of Sega's final console, the beautiful swirl that was taken from us far too soon, the Sega Dreamcast. Numbers. Yeah, it turns out a lot of games sometimes start with numbers rather than letters, so we'll start off with a numbers game. 18-wheeler American Pro Trucker has about as much content as this video. In fact, in some cases, this video may last longer. As you carefully yet maniacally drive your truck through checkpoints, this game was obviously made for arcade first and foremost. Unlike most of the home conversions, Sega forgot to add anything much more substantial to the experience. Okay, there is a small parking minigame, but not that much. Still, a fun one to pick up and play if you've got 10 minutes spare.
Keep it up! Don't even try!
AeroWings 2 Airstrike was a fairly big improvement over the original AeroWings on the Dreamcast. Not that this was massively well regarded either, but of all the games beginning with A, this is probably the pick of the bunch. It's a console exclusive to the system, and this time focuses more on the combat side of things rather than pissing around doing stunts. Or, if you're like me, crashing into the ground. While the West only got the base release, Japan got an exclusive updated release of it too. How substantial that is, I have yet to really understand. B. Bangai-O. I know, a travesty I didn't give the essential to the schlockfest that is Blue Stinger, but I've got to go with the classic rather than the memes. Bangai-O was originally a Nintendo 64 game, only released in Japan, but the Dreamcast followed soon afterwards alongside a Western release. A game by the legendary and much missed Treasure, this was a multi-directional shooter, which as far as I'm aware, was much less common at the time. It's not your standard shmup either, with many levels and free roaming around them. The game is famed for the amount of rockets that can be on the screen at once, and despite the difficulty, is worth giving a shot. It's been a long time since I played this prior to making this video, and I forgot how weird the controls are. They take a little bit of getting used to. C. Crazy Taxi. Yes, the first game. While both games are excellent, I have to give the essential badge to the original. It's pure, it's fresh, and it's simple. Earn as much money as humanly possible. It's chaotic arcade craziness that is fun to play endlessly, even when the definition of madness creeps in, because for some reason, despite never coming close to an S rank, I seem to follow the same routine over and over again, picking up the same people, because boy, I must take that priest to the church every single time. He's got a wedding to go to. The soundtrack is just as legendary. There's only like 4 or 5 songs, but it rivals Tony Hawk's Pro Skater in terms of cultural impact. Everyone knows, yeah. D. Dead or Alive 2. Now don't get me wrong, I am no fighting game fan, but I can throw my biases away and admire quality. And Dead or Alive 2 was almost impactful as Soul Calibur in terms of wowing Dreamcast owners. Visually impeccable for the time, and 3D fighting game fans on Sega systems could almost be happy to look behind their shoulder at this while holding the hand of Virtua Fighter 2. This is a rock, paper, scissors style priority system that means, well, I don't really know what it means. I just mash buttons and hope for the best, but hey, the characters look amazing. And playing it for the first time in almost a quarter of a century for this video, wow, even morons like myself can pick it up, play it, and look pretty cool doing so. A very playable fighter that is a lot of fun, even to this day. E. Evolution. The Dreamcast is a console that did not have enough time to breathe on the market to get a good stockpile of JRPGs. Evolution was one of the early ones, and while not perfect, I think it's a fun adventure-style JRPG that really has the feeling of that era. There are much better examples of the genre on the system, but I think E is a weak enough letter to let this into the party. F355 Challenge Passione Rossa. May not seem like much today, but when it released on the Dreamcast in the autumn of 2000, developed by the legendary Sega AM2 under the supervision of Yu Suzuki, this put a huge focus on simulation. This was the game for car nerds that need to change their underwear after watching an episode of Top Gear. Some will not enjoy the lack of content, but for what is essentially an arcade game, one car, a handful of tracks to master may be all that you need. I remember having a dodgy disc of this as a kid, and I kinda hated it because I was a kid and I wanted to blow things up, not drive perfectly in a graceful racing line. But for those that do enjoy it, it's still a very well controlling game. G. Grandia II. Perhaps you think that my JRPG bias is showing through again, but looking at the other G titles on the Dreamcast library, Grandia II easily stands out amongst them. It would need a giant killer to overcome it. Well, there is a game called Giant Killers, but it's shit and it wasn't what I meant. Grandia II is an excellent standout JRPG that featured great production values for the genre with surprisingly great Western voice acting and, once again, a breezy, adventurous plot. It's one of the best of the system and highly recommended. H. House of the Dead 2. This was almost a tough one, but House of the Dead 2 is such an iconic and fun light gun shooter that is more than just the memes. It's a genuinely exciting and heart-pounding romp that's great to play with friends or going alone. Going through the different routes like a Star Fox game added great replayability, and the original mode added to this Dreamcast version with collectible items added to the variety and the hope that crap players such as myself may be able to see the ending. And if you don't have a CRT or a light gun to play it, don't worry, you can use the controller and it's generally much easier, but perhaps less fun. Illbleed. This was a tough choice, and maybe I picked uniqueness over a game that has more quality behind it. But of all the handful of games available, I would definitely pick up Illbleed. This was developed by the same company as Blue Stinger, but they changed their name, maybe from embarrassment, I don't know, and that may give you a slight idea about the potential jank involved in this one. Illbleed is a hard game to describe. The closest thing would be survival horror, but don't go in expecting a Resident Evil or Silent Hill clone. It tries something different, which was what was needed when the genre was dying at the time. Yes, remember that time when people were tired of survival horrors? Idiots. I can't say this game is good, like wholeheartedly, but it is one of the standout Dreamcast exclusives in the way that it approaches being a game, avoiding traps rather than shotgunning zombies' heads off. J. I think I would be hunted down if I did not choose Jet Set Radio or Jet Grind Radio, if you prefer a slightly worse title. This is a legendary game that amplified the cool 2000s era, when life was actually pretty awesome, and the only thing terrible going on in the world at that time was the Dreamcast's failure to make money for Sega. Despite its brief appearance on the Dreamcast and a sequel on the Xbox, you'd think such a short-lived series wouldn't have much effect on the industry, but no, you can't go a bloody week without some indie game claiming to be inspired by it. Well, this is the OG, and well worth adding to your collection if you want to feel cooler than you'll ever actually be. K. Got to admit, K is not a letter blessed with classic titles, but I think everyone could do with a charming C-tier 3D action platformer in their life. Kao the Kangaroo is a Dreamcast console exclusive, which adds to the charm in an era when 3D platformers were also going through a bit of a phase before the likes of Jak and Daxter brought them back to the coolness. The Dreamcast had to settle for this. Not a bad little game, and did spawn a multi-platform sequel, as well as a modern reboot a couple of years back, so it seems some do have this little game in their heart. L. Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver, an easy enough choice because I'd rather not be bludgeoned to death by fans of the series. They're a passionate bunch. I will fully admit I have not played this game aside from capturing a small amount of footage for this video, but I've been in the gaming zeitgeist long enough to know and feel the reverence for this series and especially this game. This is the best one, right? I don't know, but you should own it, play it, and find out. Fantastic production value for the era. It's hard to believe this game came out just 1 year after Ocarina of Time. It's a classic, apparently. M. Marvel vs. Capcom 2, New Age of Heroes. I mean, I hate these games. The only fun I can have with them is if I'm playing against a friend who is equally as moronic in the genre as myself. But even I know a quality fighter when I see one. And while this may not be technically the best, it's definitely one of the most iconic. A great roster of fighters that make fans of both companies drool. I actually had this on my original Xbox, believe it or not. I don't know why. I think my cousin forced me to get it. And let's just say it rekindled my admiration for Jill Valentine as a teenager. N. NFL 2K2. You heard that right, ladies and gentlemen. This clueless British guy is sticking an American football game in an Essentials game list. But hear me out, I've played it, and I quite enjoyed it from an outsider's perspective. And back in the day, these sports games were essential in the console wars. Nowadays, it doesn't matter, but back in the 90s and early 2000s, Sega, Nintendo, Sony had an all-out war to get the best sports games on their consoles, and Sega were often the best. Everyone remembers NHL and the Mega Drive, right? Even Europeans remember that. And NFL 2K2 was the pinnacle of American football at this point. I am not biased against sports games. You can play this right now and you can still have fun with it. Even as much as the latest soulless Madden.
40, the 25, the 10, and he's
Anthony Tucker had a phenomenal run there, getting past the front lines.
Oh, bugger. I mean, Ooga Booga. No, I don't. I mean, Outtrigger. I can never look or write the name of this game without thinking it just looks weird and wrong, almost to an unacceptable level. Also, probably because the dodgy disc my dad had, my go-to pirate scribbled the name wrong on the disc, making it look like Outrigger, as though it had something to do with a yacht race. I can't blame him though. Writing can't be easy with a hook hand and wearing an eye patch. Anyways, this game was beyond me as a kid. I could not get my head around the fact it was an arcade game. I always felt like it should have been something with a bit more to it. Like, where's the adventure part? Where's the story? Where are the levels? I couldn't get over its lack of scope. It didn't look like it should be an arcade game, but now, as an adult and fully grasping the concept of what the game actually is, this would have been a pretty fun online competitive game. You just have to get used to the controls, which really needed 2 analog sticks.
Good job. Result.
P. Power Stone 2. I know, controversial considering a good few people much prefer the original, and there's also an all-time classic JRPG starting with P, but this one comes from the heart. The original Power Stone is cool and all, but it's much more like a traditional fighter, and I don't like fighters. However, Power Stone 2 is more like a mayhem party brawler, a bit like Smash Bros, which means I love it. Crazy fun with crazy weapons, and I absolutely love the item mixing mechanic in this Dreamcast version. I could play this game all day long. Q. Well, with only 3 choices, one of them being a Japanese quiz game, the other being an online-only FPS, by default, it almost has to go to Q-Bert. I bet even Qbert can't believe it. I mean, the fact that you have to angle the controller weirdly to make the isometric view not so difficult to actually control, and when you get used to it, it's not a bad game. It was popular enough for a reason, and there were so many sequels over the years. It was a C-tier arcade mascot, and it's alright. It's not a terrible game to add to your list. R. Resident Evil Code Veronica. This was a tough one, but back in the day, the hype for this as a Dreamcast exclusive was off the scales. They couldn't get this game out quickly enough to satisfy Dreamcast owners. Of course, it came out later on the PS2, but we didn't know that back in the day. On the Dreamcast, it was worth the wait. Now using 3D environments, it's probably aged a bit worse than its predecessors, but when reviews came out, survival horror fans had never been better. I never actually finished this one before. Back in the day, I used to watch my dad play the Resident Evil games because I was a coward, and I don't think he actually got through this one. Maybe one day, I will be able to do so.
Wait, don't shoot.
Who are you?
S. I mean, S is the letter that instantly confirmed to me that I need to make about 5 of these Dreamcast lists because, fittingly for Sega, S is packed with quality, full of legendary games, not just on this system, but of all time. But if I had to pick one, the first one, the one that my heart is telling me that you should pick up, it's Skies of Arcadia. While other Dreamcast S games are great, fantastic, legendary, I believe they do have their equals in the genre elsewhere, but Skies of Arcadia has no peer. It is the greatest JRPG of all time. It's a game that personifies the word adventure. It's so good, I made a 3.5-hour video about the damn thing on this very channel. This was not an easy choice, because I'm sure you're all listing the other S games that you think are better suited than Skies of Arcadia. I am sorry, Sega Marine Fishing fans, but you'll have to wait for another list another day. T. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. This one that I let my personal feelings not affect me because as much as I would love to, tell you about Time Stalkers and give it the second chance that it deserves, I think having a Pro Skater game is the more sensible option. These Dreamcast versions often came out the best too, with the best visuals and polish compared to the PlayStation 1 or Nintendo 64 versions. With its banging soundtrack, addictive challenge, and just being so endlessly cool, you can't go wrong with one of these two in your collection. U. Under Defeat is an official Dreamcast game that released in 2006. Imagine the look on Sega's faces when they got the production request for this one. I bet they had to bring some bloke in back from retirement who could work the disc printing machine. This is a brilliant helicopter shooter that very recently saw a new re-release in HD on the Nintendo Switch, and it's as awesome as it's ever been. It only released in Japan on the Dreamcast though, so you're gonna want to import it if you want to play it. V. Virtua Tennis 2. Tennis has never been so cool. The fact that Tim Henman is in this game and yet he doesn't bring the cool factor down to 0 speaks for how legendarily cool this game is. There are no better tennis games. There's no better addictive World Tour mode. Even my auntie, who doesn't play games, she still talks about Virtua Tennis 2. Don't discount it because it's a sports game. It's one of the best sports games ever made.
30-15.
W. Wacky Races, a game that surprised me when I revisited it for my ill-fated Dreamcast adventure. It's a flawed kart racer type game, but that didn't stop me from having fun with it. Once I'd ripped out all my fingernails from the difficulty, yeah, it's a hard game, but it's a kart racer that reminds me a bit more of like Diddy Kong Racing than say Mario Kart. There's an adventure-style hub world and a variety of missions. It's well worth a play for sure. The graphics are colourful, the animation imitated the cartoon really well. It was a pretty good job.
Lap 2. Number 6, the Army Surplus Special quickly passes by.
X. I am sorry, I have failed you. There is no X game on the Dreamcast, so instead, I'll have to remind you to subscribe and like and all those wavy gravy things. Y. Not a lot of options for Y, but there is a clear winner, but you'll have to import it from Japan. Yu Suzuki GameWorks Volume 1. This is a release I genuinely fire up from time to time when I've got like 10 to 15 minutes to spare. It's a collection of 5 arcade classics made by Yu Suzuki: Space Harrier, Hang-On, Power Drift, Afterburner, and Outrun. You don't get better than that, and they are all arcade perfect as far as I'm aware. Of course, it's obvious for the time, but it wasn't until this kind of era where companies started taking their classics a bit more seriously. Often they remade the arcade game for consoles with changes or cutbacks, but these were honest-to-God originals, and all of them are fun to pick up and play. I know Y seems like slim pickings, but this is genuinely a great package, and I do recommend picking it up. Z or Z. Not a lot of choice, but I'm gonna go with Zombie Revenge for sheer bonkers arcade type gameplay. It's not great, nor will it hold your attention for too long, but there's something about it that really has the essence of the Dreamcast, and it's still an exclusive to this day. This would have been one to rent back in the day rather than buy, but it's a fun one to pick up and blow off some steam to. A spin-off of the House of the Dead series, it's a beat-em-up, but with lots of guns. Great idea, didn't quite stick the landing, but it's the effort that counts in my eyes. And there we have the A to Z of the Sega Dreamcast. What do you think of my picks? Would you like to see a part 2 of the Dreamcast where I go through again with different games? Or would you like me to show you the A to Z of the Sega Saturn? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you to my Patreon supporters. They got to watch this video early and ad-free. If you want to join them for a lot of perks and see my top 10 personal favorite Dreamcast games, you can watch that on there in the next couple of days. Take care, guys. Have a good day.